everyone else is just going through like severe childhood trauma. The thing like filming wise to me that is interesting is that there's only a couple months between Sea of Monsters and Titan's Curse. Titan's Curse happens in the winter time,
Mhm.
and so they don't need to wait as long to film again.
Yeah.
They could start filming much sooner, because of that they don't have to wait until like June or July or August or whatever. They could start filming in like February or March because that would actually fit like the kind of theme anyway of that season because it is all in the winter time. It's
Mhm.
cold, it's snowing. They're like trying to figure out how to not freeze when they're out on the road and they don't have anybody to help them. As soon as they announced that they were making a TV show of Percy Jackson and that Rick Riordan wasn't very involved and that everything would actually be like accurate, everyone has been waiting for this season. Everyone
Mhm.
has been waiting for Titan's Curse. Like we love the first two books, but everyone is dying to
Yeah.
watch this season. Everyone's been waiting. Like give it to me. Just give it to me. Just like finally get there so we can get this like book on a TV show and have it done by people that know what they're doing extremely well and absolutely rip our hearts out because this is like the book where everything is just so much more serious. The way that like in Sea of Monsters that you think that Tyson is dead and then he ends up being okay at the end, that like messes with you when you're reading Titan's Curse because I remember the first time that I read it, I thought that Bianca would show up at camp and that she would be there at the end. And they the way that they talk about her the whole rest of that book is setting is like he knows that. And so it's even more devastating when you get back to camp and Nico says, I know that she's dead because I felt her die. And I remember the first time I read that book just like staring off at the wall for like 20 minutes afterwards, realizing like, oh, she's actually dead and she's never coming back. I did not even think that that was an option. And like somehow that has happened. Did I just read a like a 13-year-old girl being electrocuted to death? Like actually she's 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did. And I was just like, holy Jesus, that's like a lot more serious than I thought. My head might explode watching like how Thalia talks to Percy for an entire season. And that is one of those things that is interesting about Thalia is that people it's easier for people to just like her, but when you reread that book as especially as you get older and you read what she says to him, you're like Jesus Christ. Oh,
Yeah.
like God. And seeing her be like that with him is going to be like hard, but it's part of like it has to happen that way because it's part of the storyline of how things happen in that book and it's Percy's whole story that he's just scapegoated aggressively so in that season because by that point Luke is like taking, you know, Kronos in his little bitchy little body. The first scene of the entire book is Percy feeling insecure because he's around Annabeth after not seeing her for 3 months when she's been at school with Thalia. He asks Thalia a question about her mother and she rips his head off. And so then he's just like, I'm just gonna stay away from them so that she doesn't have to talk to me because I make her upset by just like existing.
Yeah.
Um, and then like 2 minutes later, Annabeth is kidnapped and he's talking and he's trying to convince them to let him up so he can jump off of a cliff and go after her. And they're telling him no. And it just like goes on after that. Like 5 minutes after that is when Thalia blames him for Annabeth being kidnapped. And he's thinking in his head like, yeah, that is my fault. And it's like this season with Percy, if anything, will be the ultimate like example of like this is not correct. Like just so you know, you're being way too hard on yourself. This is what abuse does to people's brains. It makes you feel like you're at fault for everything.
Yeah.
And what you can't get any better than Percy sitting there being like, yeah, it is my fault that Annabeth was kidnapped, and it's somehow my fault that Bianca was joined joined Artemis even though I told her to stop. And it's somehow my fault that capture the flag happened even though it's completely Thalia's fault. We wanted to talk about was Artemis, because I was like, oh, that is really interesting to think about them doing a character like that right now, with like the extreme like gender politics that are going on right now, because you can't like completely like make Artemis nicer, because it's literally the plot of the book. The whole thing of that, the kind of like ridiculousness of how they treat Percy in that book is that like he is the literal god of the ocean. Like he's the god of the ocean's son, and they're looking for a mystical sea cow, and nobody ever asked him, the child that talks to the sea creatures, if he's seen a mystical sea cow. They never ask him. They never even think, it never even occurs to them that he would know that. And he makes friends with the sea cow, and the sea cow is his best friend in that book, and just like follows him around and is like, "Are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
are you all right? Are you okay?" And he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm not okay."
It's, yeah, it's so ridiculous. They were like the one demigod we have. We only have one that has anything to do with the sea, but we're looking for a sea monster. Let's take the satyr.
Yeah, like let's not ask him anything at all. Let's never even ask him or bring it up or anything like that. And then get upset with him much later on in the book when he realizes that that's who Bessie is. And it's like, well, nobody ever asked. I talk to sea creatures all the time.
Well, and that's the
And
thing is, I didn't get the impression that everybody knows he's been going on these secret missions to go help sea creatures, because he's kind of told very silly, like in the beginning of that book, of just like, yeah, I've been doing this for months now. They keep coming to me. I feel like it's the type of thing that Percy would be like, oh, damn it, okay, I'm gonna go do this, and then he wouldn't say anything to anybody because he's like, this is just part of it, right? Like this is
yeah,
what I'm supposed to do.
yeah, Percy would see it as like, oh, this is just my job. I'm supposed to help these creatures. It's my responsibility to help them
Yeah,
because
like who else
I'm,
is going to? There's no other Poseidon kids.
yeah, and he just like loves all of them, and that's why he gives them like adorable names like Bessie and things like that, because he just, it's like how I talk to animals, honestly. Like I talk to every single animal I see. I will just sit there and talk to them. Like my mom does too. And her boyfriend will like take videos of them when they're on their trips of her just talking to, and I do the same thing. I just sit there and talk to them all the time. And that's
Yeah.
basically what Percy is doing, where he just like likes them and cares about them, so he's going to go and help them because he's a nice empathetic kid. And um but it is like a, the whole story with Artemis is going to be fascinating because she fits a lot of stereotypes. And the thing that is really fun about this book series happening while Trump is president is that it very much like throws in the face like the negative stereotypes that like the right wing side would not like to see themselves in, without making it obvious that they are doing that. But also obvious enough where they can't ignore what they're seeing. Like
Yeah.
it's a good like balancing act. Like Rick does a good job because he's like making a point, but he's not like banging you over the head with like a giant anvil that falls on your head and like knocks you out, because it's so obvious. Like Artemis is this god. It makes sense for her that she would, because of the god that she is, that she would think that men are inherently bad and that women are inherently good just because of their genitals. Like, and that's all she's basing it on. And so that's very much like what turfs are like now. Artemis fits a lot of stereotypes of like kind of not
Yeah.
only straight up turfs, but women who don't think they are turfs. There's a lot like every Calypso fan is like that like gets mad at me in comments, and I eventually just like start deleting their comments after a couple days. And they end up calling me a misogynist. They all call me a misogynist at a certain point. Um, those girls are like on the line of becoming a turf, and they don't even understand that they are, because in the reason why they think that I'm a misogynist is because when I talk about Calypso, I point out that she is the abusive one in that situation. and they look at Percy, a literal 14-year-old child, and they think that he has to be the abusive one, the bad one, the one that is hurting the woman, purely because he's a boy.
Mhm.
That's literally all it is that because he's a boy, he has to be the one and she has to be the victim. And they can't even notice in a situation like that when it's so obvious that that's not what's going on here. They still can't see it because they're stuck in like those gender roles that they just assume that like the guy has to be the bad one and the girl has to be the victim. And even when it's very obviously not that way, they still can't see it. And so there's a lot of like white women particularly that are like kind of teetering that line. And like right now is a time when a lot of those people may like fall over the edge. Like the whole Blake Lively situation is a really good example of that. Like, by the way, like we don't like Ryan Reynolds at all, but these are like rooted in reality reasons. I don't like that they use their children as pawns for PR and marketing. And I don't like the stories about him, like how he treats child actors on sets. And I don't like the idea that somebody like that in Hollywood can just like roam around and do whatever he wants. And it makes me nervous about things that we don't know about. That's not any of this other insane just shenanigans that we've watched happen over since like last August. But it's just like you can see people kind of towing that line, and that's what I mean by like they could show Artemis and even the other hunters as kind of like making people uncomfortable by like seeing themselves in a way that they don't like, because it's one of those things of like it's very obvious when you're reading the book and then when they would be watching the TV show that the hunters are like not in the right for how they're treating Percy. Like it's very like you care about Percy. You know that he should be on the quest to go save like Annabeth's life. And
Mhm.
and so there's no real reason you can think of why they wouldn't bring him besides that they just don't want to bring him because he's a boy. That's literally the only reason why they don't bring him.
There's
Series.
a famous mass shooter that like reminds me of Luke. Now that you said this, I don't remember the name, but do you remember it was a guy and he was mildly attractive, I would say. And he had a whole manifesto about how he couldn't get girlfriends or something like that. I want to say he was in Southern California or somewhere close to me even.
I think I know what school shooting that was. I think that was one of the
I
ones
don't
that
think, was it
happened.
a school even? I can't remember. It might have been a college, but he was older. He wasn't high school aged, if I
Oh, I
remember.
remember that. That happened. I remember when that happened. And yeah, it was a college in Southern California, and he had like like entire YouTube videos that he posted online talking about how like nobody wanted to date him and nobody liked him, and he like got in his car and just started like shooting people on the street when he was driving down the street and
Mhm.
things like that. But that is like the Luke character is an also very like abrupt way to show kind of the the people that are doing this kind of stuff, like what happens to them, because like yeah, I guess you can sit there and be like, yeah, Luke had some not so nice things that happened in his childhood, but it's like, does that justify him torturing somebody who used to look up to him and
Yeah.
thought that he would help her? And does that help him torturing Thalia or trying to convince them to kill Percy for him
Well,
because he
yeah, and
can't do it himself?
you brought this up with the Luke defenders in a recent video that when people like us see that have trauma, that have asked ourselves a million times, does my abuser's trauma matter in this situation? Am I being too hard by holding them responsible because they have trauma too? And like we all go through that phase, right? Like I'm sure you've even thought it of your dad, and your dad did some really terrible shit.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's hard not to do that. And then you have people saying, well, okay, but Luke was traumatized. That's why he killed a bunch of people.
I say that as my dad was very extremely abusive, and um, when when I was a kid, the entire time all of that stuff was going on, and it was like the absolute worst of the quote unquote stuff was from like when I was 6 to when I was 12. That was like the worst time. Um, and that entire time he had a therapist
Oh
that
my
he
god.
saw weekly. When I went to therapy when I was 12, because my mom was like, and my dad were like, she doesn't want to live anymore. They had me go to a therapist in the same office of the therapist that he had. Like, obviously a very different therapist,
Yeah.
but it was still like somebody in this, and they went to that office because he had been seeing somebody there. And yeah, like he had a therapist, he had a psychiatrist. He was taking I can remember being I can remember when I was like 9 or 10 or whatever, I would like walk around in the middle of the night when everyone else was asleep, and I would be like sitting in the bathroom just like staring at myself, and I would look at his pill bottles. And I can remember doing that and seeing like Prozac. And like on it, he took Prozac for the longest time. He saw a therapist the entire time. The entire time that that was going on. What did they talk about? Like, genuinely, what did they talk about? And
Oh,
so I don't care. I don't care if abusive people also are sad sometimes. You did the worst stuff to other people, so I don't care like if bad things happen to you, because that is superseded when you use that to just hurt other people.
mhm.
And so the thing with like Luke, I try to been like trying to make the point of saying lately is like the thing with Mason, that like the biggest Percy Jackson account that I look at every once in a while just because he's the biggest Percy Jackson account. I know that there are kids that have gone through abuse that watch his videos, because there's no way that there isn't for a Percy Jackson book series, and he has so many followers. So I feel like this like weird duty to like watch his videos and then like counteract them when I see him say things that are just like so off. And he did a video recently where he was talking about like trying to defend Luke, and he was talking about like, oh, if you think that Luke is bad because he wanted to, and he's irredeemable, things like that, because he wanted to kill Percy, then wouldn't you say the same thing about the gods? And wouldn't you say the same thing about like Clarice and people like that? And I'm like, that is the
That's just the
literal
point.
that is
Yeah.
the literal point of this entire book series, and I am weirded out that you don't seem to understand this in this moment of time. Because that is literally the entire point. The entire point of this book series is that other people like Clarice, or even like characters you don't even know yet, like Ethan Nakamura and people like that, Nico even, they have reasons to be upset with Percy because this world that the gods have set up in isn't an abusive world, and it is a world where like these kids are not supposed to get along. They're supposed to fight to prove that they are the best for their abusive parent. Like we talked about how like siblings usually don't get along in abusive families in the exact same sort of way. They would rather us fight with each other and like get everything that they want out of that situation, instead of us realizing that we're both mad at them. But then also Clarice realizes that Percy is a good person because she gets to know him. He gives her the golden fleece at the end of Sea of Monsters, when
Mhm.
it's actually not a good idea for him personally to do that. And he's like, no, it's the right thing for you. This is your quest. You can take this back to camp. I don't care. I don't need to like get everyone like attention and glory and whatever. And that's when she realizes like, oh, Percy is actually a nice person.
Yep.
And he's not actually the like person that I think he is, based on just like projections that I feel, because I feel competitive with him. And so she doesn't try to hurt him after that. There's a lot of characters like that, like Ethan Nakamura, or even like Chris Rodriguez in like later books. They both like go back, they like actually agree way more with Percy, and they respect him as a character. That happens with a lot of characters in this book series. That never happens with Luke. Every other, even Annabeth, like Annabeth doesn't like Percy at first, and then she gets to know him in the first book, and she like doesn't want to hurt him. In the beginning of the first book, if Luke would have been like, join me, Annabeth would have been like, okay. But then by the time she gets to the end of the book and she's gone through this whole thing with Percy, she isn't going to do that anymore. But
Yeah.
like Luke knows Percy in like that way. Like he literally like becomes his friend purposefully to try to like kill him. And so he does see Percy's humanity more than anyone else. Percy, when he's like scared and alone and is afraid of everybody at camp and doesn't know what he's doing, and he thinks that his mom is dead and he wants to save her but he doesn't know how. In this like very vulnerable moment, like Luke talks to him in the most vulnerable time, really, for him in this world.
I hope you're sitting down, but I think I've made some friends here. Like, real friends. I think they might really like me. Imagine that.
And nothing during any of those interactions make him change his mind. He still does the exact same stuff. And so, like, it's like, okay, that's literally the point of this book series, is that this world is set up for them to not get along. But Percy doesn't follow the rules of everybody else, so eventually everyone kind of slowly gets to realize that he's not the person they think he is, because he doesn't want, like, the glory like everyone else is supposed to want from the gods. He doesn't want it. And that makes people like him and realize, like, oh, I shouldn't hurt this kid because he's actually a nice person. Except for Luke. Luke never realizes that. And that's, like, because it's literally just him. It's just him. It's nobody else. It's just him. That's why it's like, it doesn't matter, like, why he's like that, because it's like there's never a good enough reason for why somebody would be like that and, like, hurt the people there were. That's what I figured out with my own dad, that, like, there was never going to be something that I uncovered about him that, like, explained all the things that he did to me and everyone else that he ever met in his life. Because there's never something you can think of that's bad enough to excuse that sort of behavior. And so it's like, I'm not going to spend that much time trying to figure out why Luke is like that. I just know that he is. And that he's the only one who is. Like, he's the only one who is so caught up in wanting, like, the chaos and attention and admiration from his daddy that he can't even see, like, the humanity of all the other kids around him. And I don't know why that happened, but I just don't care.
To destroy that mindset in the gods, that demigods are just tools, we're just going to use them. If they break, whatever, we throw them away. He hated that mindset. And yet, here in Titan's Curse, we have him saying, the demigods are tools that the gods use, so I'm taking away their tools. Yeah.
His whole story is a very, like, aggressive sort of, like, MAGA thing. Because there's a lot of, like, angsty little people like that out there that think that because something bad happened to them that they deserve to just do whatever they want, or think that they should get things that they want and they haven't gotten them, so it has to be everyone else's fault. And they don't ever stop to think, like, why am I so upset? Like, why am I taking out the fact that I'm mad at my dad on literally everyone else on this planet but my dad? Like, why don't you just go yell at Hermes and beat him up or something? Like, I don't know. Go yell at him, talk to him, scream at him, do something at him.
Going back to the book that's new, you can do bad things and come back from it. We don't want to spread this message that, like, there's no redemption ever, ever, ever. Like, maybe certain actions there's no redemption from. I'll give you that. But given you haven't seriously hurt somebody, I'm talking like SA, murder, things like that, you can come back from it.
And, like, honestly, the storyline of Luke is somebody that had a lot of chances to get better, or like, you know, rehabilitate himself, stop what he was doing, and he purposely, at every chance that happened, chose the other way. And, like, I found that old quote from Rick Riordan on Goodreads from, like, 2012, where somebody asked him, like, would Luke, like, do you think that Luke would be reincarnated, or that he would have another chance to, like, live like a better life, or make better decisions, or whatever, if he got another chance to live? And Rick was like, I hope so. And he's like, without, like, sounding, like, religious about it, that's always kind of the hope, that you realize that, like, you know, that you could have redemption. And he said, like, it's always sad when people don't, like, do that. They don't take the path of redemption ever, and you have, like, no choice. But, like, you always hope that they're going to change their mind. Yeah. And that's, like, the whole thing with Luke, is that him deciding to kill himself at the end is not redemption. it was just like I lost, so I might as well like take myself out now. Bye.
Yep.
But like he purposely, like, there's so many different times that he could have made a different decision, and he actively chose not to. Like, Titan's Curse is so like intense and like complex and stuff that you could do like an entire podcast just on that one book, because there's so much happening in it that I feel like we're just always going to somehow come back to talking about it in some way, because there's just so much, like,
It's not
the
good.
and especially like for the people who like the show, like they don't know that much about the books. Going from like Sea of Monsters to Titan's Curse, where two of the characters that are introduced are murdered on screen, is going to be like a lot, because on a show like this, it's kind of a weird thing with shows like this that you don't expect people to die. And in like one book, two main characters die.
Yeah.
And so you're just like,
Shit. Yeah.
like what? And then they're also like literally debating about killing Percy at like the very end of the book. And so that's just like, okay. Like that's just really intense.
Yeah.
And it does set up to the rest of the books really well. Obviously, there's much more death that happens after that. That is Luke's fault.